If I keep quiet, this baby won't survive until next week. That's what Saara, the new cleaning lady, whispered, clutching her apron, when she noticed the millionaire's son was losing weight every day, and that his perfect fiancé wouldn't let anyone near the crib. That put her on high alert. The baby was 8 months old. His mother died in childbirth, and his father, Artur Lacerda, owner of a hotel chain, showed up with Lorena less than 2 months later, a top model, who looked like she stepped out of a commercial. The baby's cries were thin, his tiny body frail, his ribs showing. Special milk formula, they said, but it smelled like a lie. And when Saara caught the driver, Henry, leaving the hallway with a small colorless vial, she understood that the issue was much deeper, only she didn't know how deep, and the worst was yet to come. But before starting this story, tell me in the comments where in the world you are watching us from. And if you are enjoying this story. Artur Lacerda's Crystal Palace was not just a mansion. It was a monument erected to coldness and distance. Its architecture was a paradox. Vast floor-to-ceiling windows were meant to flood the rooms with welcoming sunlight, but the effect was the opposite. Everything there, from the polished marble floors to the pristine Greek statues, screamed wealth, but whispered loneliness. Artur Lacerda, the owner, a man in his 40s with a sparse beard and eyes that seemed to have lost focus a long time ago, was the personification of that house, powerful yet visibly broken. His shoulders, once broad with a tycoon's confidence, now seemed to bear the weight of a grief that paralyzed him, leaving him a hostage to his own businesses and that deafening silence. Saara, on the other hand, was the silent opposite of everything the house represented. She was an invisible force, a cleaning employee whose routine made her practically a ghost in the grand rooms. She was small, with a strong, agile constitution that belied her discretion. Her brown skin and black hair, always pulled back in a tight bun, blended with her service uniform, making her easy to ignore. But what set her apart were her eyes, almond-shaped and a deep brown, that seemed to absorb and catalog every detail, every shadow, every displaced object. She was not curious. She was observant. She had come from a life of hard work and knew that, in the world of the wealthy, true information traveled through the corners and crevices. She was the unpaid guardian of the Lacerda house's secrets, a position that sometimes made her shudder. On a Tuesday morning, while cleaning the vast corridor leading to the private wing, Saara felt the cold air like a shock. It was the frozen room, little Julian's nursery. The baby, only 8 months old, was the only spot of innocence in that desert of opulence. Artur's only remaining link to his deceased wife. The newly hired nanny kept the air conditioner permanently on high, something that defied logic for an infant. Saara, upon entering, felt the icy breeze cut her skin, making her hold her breath. Julian was in his crib, pale, with a thinness that clutched at her heart. His lips, once pink, had a bluish tinge, and he wasn't moving with the energy expected of a baby. He seemed almost lethargic. Saara, unable to contain the worry rising in her throat, approached Artur's office door and knocked lightly. He, buried in papers and with his cell phone pressed to his ear, barely looked up. "Mr. Lacerda," Saara began, keeping her voice low and formal. "With all due respect, I notice that the air in little Julian's room is very cold. He seems a bit pale." Artur, irritated by the interruption from an employee, gestured curtly for her to wait. When he finally ended the call, his expression was one of extreme exhaustion. "Mrs. Saara, it is not your place to comment on the baby's care," he said, in a dry tone, yet without malice, only weariness. He rubbed his temples. "Lorena and the nanny assure me it's the ideal temperature to prevent mite proliferation and keep the environment sterile. They are medical instructions and those of my fiancé." The mention of Lorena, Artur's fiancé, an elegant socialite of unquestionable beauty, made Saara's stomach turn. Her coldness matched the ice of the house perfectly. Artur, blinded by grief and the trust he placed in Lorena to handle domestic tasks, had handed over the reins of the house and his son to hands that seemed, at the very least, insensitive. "I understand, sir," Saara replied, returning to her ghost-like role. But the image of Julian's pale face would not leave her mind. That day, Saara performed her first act of silent heroism. She was cleaning the air conditioner control console outside the room when, with a movement that seemed clumsy and spontaneous, she accidentally spilled a drop of water from her duster onto the digital panel. She frowned dramatically and muttered, loud enough to be heard if anyone was nearby, "Oh my God, what a disaster. I need to turn this thing off immediately to dry it before it short circuits." And so, with the excuse of a small cleaning accident, she turned it off. It was an act of rebellion, a small flame of human warmth she ignited against the institutionalized coldness. She felt a slight tremor in her hands, but the satisfaction of having introduced a little comfort into the baby's room was undeniable. Later, passing through the hallway, she paused briefly at the open door of Julian's room. Watching the baby, who seemed to be breathing a little more calmly, she smiled slightly to herself, a smile that lasted only an instant until an icy voice cut through her like a razor. "Any problem with the cleaning, MRs?" The air froze again, but not from the room's temperature. Lorena, in her gray silk dress that seemed to flow from her body, stood a few feet away, arms crossed. Her beauty was undeniable, but her blue eyes were a shade of ice Saara had never seen before, and they were fixed on the crib, then on Saara. The hook of that gaze was profound. It wasn't the common distrust of an employer. It was that of a predator whose prey was being touched. Saara felt a shiver run down her spine. Her mask of the clumsy employee was about to be tested. The air cut by Lorena's question was almost as oppressive as the room's cold. Saara, however, was a professional of invisibility and discretion. Her face remained impassive, the epitome of the subordinate caught red-handed in what appeared to be a service failure. "No problem, Mrs. Lorena," she replied in a neutral voice, with a slight inflection of apology. "Just checking a detail on the crib's finish, to ensure there's no dust. Mr. Lacerda values this room very much." Lorena studied her for a moment that felt like an eternity, her thin lips barely moving. Her eyes, however, were a window to cold calculation. She was not convinced, but Saara's role as a cleaning lady made her harmless in the fiancé's view. "See to it that it stays that way, Mrs. Saara. The nanny and I have high standards for asepsis. If the air conditioner is turned off, for any reason, inform me immediately." "Understood. Understood, madam." And with that brief exchange, Lorena turned and entered the room, closing the door with a soft, yet definitive click that seemed to seal Saara outside. The cleaning lady took a deep breath. The challenge was set that same day. Saara's intuition led her to a new point of investigation. Henry, Arter's driver, was a large, taciturn man with a shaved head and an aura of brutal efficiency. He was Arter's shadow, always present, always silent. Saara began to observe him discreetly. Henry had a pattern. At the end of his shift, he would pass by the service annex before leaving. It was a small warehouse for tools and cleaning products, rarely frequented by anyone else. Saara, pretending to replenish her own supplies, waited patiently. Hidden behind piles of cardboard boxes, like clockwork, Henry appeared. He didn't look around, only at the metallic trash can, and with a swift movement, discarded a small, colorless vial. The object, the size of a thumb, was transparent, and its contents seemed to be only water. Henry closed the trash can and walked away. Saara's heart was beating like a drum in her chest. As soon as she was sure he was gone, she crept to the trash can. She rummaged through the rubber waste and paper scraps until she found the vial. It was empty and had no label, but the faint smell emanating from it was slightly sweet and medicinal, something she couldn't identify. Saara hastily tucked it into her apron pocket. Feeling the warmth of the glass against her skin, it was the first material proof that something was seriously wrong. The next step was risky. Saara needed unusual help. She remembered Andre, a former co-worker, who had been the Lacerda family chef for years before opening his own gourmet traiteur. Andre was loyal, discreet, and, most importantly, had a brother who worked in a food analysis laboratory. The next day, on her day off, Saara met Andre at a simple cafe, far from the mansion's opulence. "You asked me to come here, Saara," said Andre, a man in his early 40s, with a gentle smile and steady hands that told stories of kneaded dough. "And by the look on your face, It's not to ask me for the panna cotta recipe. Saara placed the vial on the table, covering it with her hand. Andre, I need your brother to look at this. No questions asked, no identification of the vial, just an analysis. It's urgent. It has to do with little Julian. The mention of the baby, whom Andre was fond of, made his smile disappear. He picked up the vial, examining it against the light. Do you know the risk you're taking? If Arthur finds out you're investigating, if I'm wrong, no problem. If I'm right, a baby is at risk. Will you help me or not? Her frankness was a silent plea. Andre nodded, putting the vial away. Tell Arthur I'm sending some amuse-bouches for his fiancée. That's our code. In 3 days, you'll have an answer. 3 days later, the answer arrived, not from Andre, but through an encrypted text message, mixture of neutral compounds, but a high concentration of mild alkaloid. Suggests appetite suppression and mild lethargy. Not lethal, but debilitating over time. Saara felt the ground disappear. It wasn't the nanny or the cold air. It was slow poisoning, a reduction of vitality that, in a baby, would be catastrophic. The coldness was not in the temperature, but in the intention. That same afternoon, Saara had her connection with Arthur. She was serving coffee in the immense dining room, and Arthur was reading the newspaper, chin resting on his hand. He seemed to have aged 10 years in a month. Grief and work, like a double storm, had drowned him. She placed the porcelain cup delicately in front of him. The silence was so dense it was almost palpable. Sometimes Arthur said, without raising his head, in a low, tired voice, I feel like I'm living in someone else's house. Everything here reminds me of her, but at the same time, everything is so empty. Saara could have remained silent. It was her job, but the image of Julian, the proof of the poison, Arthur's palpable pain, made her speak. Mr. Lacerda, she began, with an unexpected softness. Forgive my frankness, but you've drowned yourself in work and handed over the rest. You are the master of the house, and the baby's father. Don't let grief blind you to what's around you. Arthur raised his head sharply, with a look of surprise. His eyes, for the first time in a long time, were completely focused on her. Saara was not just an employee. She was the only person in those years who had told him something real, something that wasn't corporate advice or social flattery. She felt a protective impulse, not just for the baby, but for that powerful, yet childishly vulnerable man. He did not fire her. He just stared at her for a moment, absorbing the observation. Thank you, Saara, he said, the words sounding strangely sincere. Thank you for the observation. Saara left the room feeling the weight of a secret and the urgency of a mission. The connection with Arthur both frightened and motivated her. The distrust she felt for Lorena had turned into certainty, and she was now alone, navigating dangerous waters, with only a small empty vial and the truth on the tip of her tongue. Saara was not a superstitious person, but after that day, it seemed fate was providing her with a series of signs. The urgency to act consumed her, and she knew that time was her enemy. Julian continued to waste away, the paleness more accentuated each day. It was as if with each dose of the alkaloid, life was draining away a little more. The next point of support for her investigation, surprisingly, came from Arthur's deceased wife. The mansion's library was a place of great importance, not only for the vast collection of hardback books, but because it was the last place Arthur's wife frequently visited. It was a sanctuary for Saara, a place where she could fleetingly feel the human warmth that was missing from the rest of the house. While cleaning, Saara's hand brushed against a little-used shelf, almost at the very top, hidden behind a series of philosophy works that Arthur, notoriously, had never read. She felt something loose. A book was awkwardly wedged. As she pulled it out, she noticed the spine was slightly displaced. It wasn't a book, but a small box hidden inside a niche, wrapped in velvet. Inside the box, perfectly preserved, was Julian's mother's lost diary. Saara took the diary to a discreet corner of the service room. The yellowed paper and the elegant handwriting of Arthur's deceased wife were an intimate testament to a life that had been cut short. Saara began to read, her eyes wide with surprise. The diary did not speak of serious illness or complications in childbirth, as everyone thought. Instead, there were passages full of veiled fear and distrust. Lorena's presence nearby bothers me. She is very sweet, but I sense a cold calculation beneath her smile. Arthur sees her only as a distant friend, a social figure. But she asks too many questions about the business, about the assets. I feel watched. It's a ridiculous feeling, I know, but my mother's heart is warning me. I cannot risk Julian's future for a feeling. 1-page read. The diary continued, culminating in the description of the creation of a security policy she had hidden in the family's legal documents. I created a secret clause in the will. It's a defense mechanism for Julian, should something terrible happen to me, or if his father is blinded by the wrong trust. It activates only if Julian is in clear danger. It's not easy to trigger, but it's my way of ensuring my son will have a temporary guardian, someone outside the family, chosen by me, who will provide protection until the law decides the future. The discovery shocked Saara. Julian's mother had not died in peace. She was afraid. Her fear now echoed in Saara. With the tension high, Saara continued her work, but her movements were more calculated. The opportunity to confirm her suspicions rose in the kitchen. Saara was preparing tea when she saw Lorena enter the wine pantry, which had excellent sound insulation and an internal video monitoring system. She thought was turned off. Lorena was on a video call, and her countenance had completely changed. The mask of the elegant and concerned fiancé had fallen to reveal the falling mask of a cold, ruthless businesswoman. Saara, peeking through the crack in the door, only heard fragments, but they were enough to chill her blood. "Yes, Dr. Miller," Lorena said, with a tone that brooked no argument. "We need to accelerate the transfer of assets. This engagement cannot be in vain, and the boy is becoming a very annoying contractual impediment. The lawyers need to ensure that stupid policy is declared null. The will must be executed before the baby's health status draws the attention of someone smarter." The conversation continued in legal and financial jargon, but the message was clear. Lorena did not love Arthur, nor did she care about Julian. She was a predator orchestrating a plan to seize the Lacerda fortune, and the baby was the obstacle to be removed. Saara stumbled back, shocked, the drop of milk dripping from the bottle in her hands bringing her back to reality. She quickly composed herself. Now, she faced a great conflict of conscience. She had 3 pieces of the puzzle of evil: the mysterious vial with the alkaloid, proving the slow poisoning. The diary suggesting planned danger, and the existence of a secret clause, the fiancé acting as a predator to hasten the baby's death and financial gain. Saara realized with agonizing clarity that confronting Lorena directly would be suicide. Lorena was protected by Arthur's blind trust and a network of lawyers and, possibly, criminals like Henry, the driver. If Saara spoke, she would be discredited as the envious and meddling cleaning lady and probably end up dead, or, worse, Julian would pay the price. The risk was too high. She needed a plan, undeniable proof, and she needed to activate the security policy before Lorena acted. She was alone, and little Julian's life depended on her discretion and astuteness. Life in the Lacerda mansion turned into a game of chess for Saara. Her movements were calculated, her breathing measured. She was the weakest piece, but held the most powerful information. Arthur, on the other hand, was in the middle of a blizzard. Arthur's stress had become physical. Rumors of a business scandal, possibly planted, circulated in the networks and newspapers, leaving the magnate paralyzed. He was at the peak of exhaustion, sleeping only 3 or 4 hours a night. His meals were eaten in front of his laptop, and he was drowning in a sea of emails and teleconferences. One night, Saara was cleaning the meeting room adjacent to Arthur's office. He was there, slumped in his leather armchair, his suit wrinkled, a half-empty glass of whiskey on the table. His eyes were fixed on the ceiling, but he saw nothing. "I don't know what to do anymore, Saara," he said suddenly, not even noticing he was venting to the cleaning lady. He was talking more to himself than to her. "They're attacking me from all sides. It seems the whole world has turned against me. It's the pain of grief, the stress of business. Lorena tries to help, but only talks about transfers and lawyers, and the nanny only talks about sterilization." He sighed, a deep, sad sound. Arthur was confiding in the only person who seemed real in that theatrical environment. Saara, who had always been a ghost, saw there the vulnerability of a man who was losing control of everything. Saara stopped sweeping and approached the table, maintaining a respectful distance. But the frankness of the previous night spurred her on. "Mr. Lacerda," she said, her voice low but firm, "forgive me again for intervening in your personal life, but you are seeing the tip of the iceberg, not the mountain of ice underneath." He looked at her, curious. "What do you mean, Saara?" "The stress," she explained, choosing her words carefully. "It's not just the pain or the business. It's the need to disconnect that you have. When you're exhausted, the truth becomes blurred. The only way to see the truth is to step out of the cycle, to stop trusting only those who say the right thing and see who does the right thing. You're tired of empty corporate advice, aren't you?" Her advice, simple and profoundly human, hit Arthur hard. He was drowning in jargon. Saara's words were like a glass of cold water. He blinked slowly. You're right. I don't know how long it's been since I took a deep breath. I trust everyone because I'm afraid of not being able to do it alone." Saara nodded. "Fear is the weapon of those who wish you harm, sir. It paralyzes you." In that instant of deep, almost sacred, exchange aloud, sudden noise came from the hallway. Julian was having a coughing fit, a dry, strangled sound. Saara's heart skipped a beat. Arthur, paralyzed by shock and stress, was slow to react. But Saara did not hesitate. She ran to the baby's room. Julian was red, gasping, his small hands fluttering in the air. Instinctively, without thinking about rules or the absent nanny, Saara picked him up. She nestled him against her shoulder, lightly patting his back. She began to hum. It wasn't a sophisticated nursery rhyme, but a soft lullaby, almost a murmur, that came from the memories of her childhood. The rhythm was calming, and the melody unexpectedly warmed. In a matter of seconds, Julian's coughing subsided, turning into small sobs, and he snuggled his head into Saara's neck. Arthur stood in the doorway, watching the scene. He witnessed the scene, her touch calming his son in a way that Lorena, the nanny, and all the doctors had failed to do. It was the first time he saw her as more than an employee. He saw her strength, her calmness, and above all, her heart. A wave of gratitude and something else, something he didn't dare to name, ran through his body. It was an attraction born of shared pain and a protective instinct. He felt scared by that emotion. Saara handed Julian to Arthur, who held him awkwardly. Saara's fingers brushed against his. The air between them vibrated, charged with unresolved tension. He just needed warmth," she whispered, referring not only to the baby but perhaps, unconsciously, to Arthur as well. Arthur Lacerda, the magnate, just nodded, unable to speak. The baby safe in his arms. The cleaning lady he barely saw had become the only person he could trust, and that was a new danger he didn't know how to face. The moment of vulnerability between Saara and Arthur, witnessed only by little Julian, did not go unnoticed by anyone else. Lorena was a methodical and suspicious woman. She had noticed the subtle change in the nursery's temperature and, even more, the sudden change in Arthur's behavior, who seemed more alert and less inclined to delegate everything to her. In her paranoia and thirst for control, Lorena did her own investigation. Arthur's house was lined with discreet security cameras, supposedly to protect the assets. However, they were her surveillance tools. Reviewing the images, Lorena discovered the truth: the accident with the air conditioner and worse, the growing intimacy between Saara and Arthur. She saw the cleaning lady in the baby's room and the intensity of the look Arthur directed at her in the hallway. The image of the discreet rival forming was unbearable to her. Lorena, the cold queen, realized she needed a counterattack that would not just dismiss Saara, but completely disarm her. She wouldn't fire her. That might draw attention. She needed Saara to stay but become harmless. With her contacts and unrestricted access to the house documents, Lorena quickly uncovered Saara's history. She found information about Saara's discreet life, her family in the countryside, and, most importantly, a substantial debt she had incurred to pay for delicate medical treatment for her younger sister. The information was Lorena's ammunition. She summoned Saara to her private office. The environment was one of intimidating minimalism. Lorena sat behind a glass desk, looking like a statue. "Have a seat." "Mrs. Saara," Lorena said, her voice sweet yet velvety, reminiscent of the sound of steel being sharpened. Saara sat on the edge of the chair, her heart pounding. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Lorena?" "No, no problem," Lorena replied, smiling in a way that didn't reach her eyes. She slid a thin folder across the table, opening it to reveal photos of a small, humble house and then hospital documents. "I merely took an interest in your life. Your sister Isabella, is it? A delicate heart condition. And that loan you took out with Mr. Mendes for the treatment. A considerable debt. Your family dedication is admirable." Saara felt the air rush out of her lungs. She tried to maintain control, but the shock was visible. "What does that have to do with my job, Mrs. Lorena?" Lorena laughed, a dry, brief sound. "Everything. The baby is not well, Mrs. Saara, and you, with your air conditioner accidents and your lullabies, are interfering with a delicate health plan arranged by doctors and myself, and you are getting far too close to Artur." She leaned forward, the smile vanishing. The icy glare returned. "This is an emotional blackmail, Mrs. Saara," Lorena said, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "I know you are investigating. I know about the vial, and I know about your little friend, the chef. You have a very simple choice. Stay away from the baby, forget what you've seen, and your family will be safe. Your job continues. Your salary pays for your sister's treatment, and no one, not even Mr. Mendes, will bother you. One misstep, Saara, a single word to Artur, and you lose everything. Your sister, your house, your life. Understood?" Saara felt cornered, living the terrible Sophie's choice. She had to choose between personal and family safety, her sister, her only family, and the life of a child she barely knew, but who had touched her heart with overwhelming purity. She took a deep breath, absorbing the threat. There was no way to fight Lorena on her own battleground. "Understood," Saara replied, the word crushed in her throat, yet determination flickering in her deep brown eyes. She stood up. "That's good," Lorena said, smiling again with satisfaction. "You may return to your work, Saara. Remember, a good ghost is one who has no voice." Saara left the room in silence, but her mind was on fire. She had not chosen to give up on Julian. She had only chosen the right moment to fight. The blackmail had given her one thing, certainty of Lorena's guilt, and now she had valuable information to use. Lorena considered herself victorious and, as such, would become reckless. Saara knew that the perfect stage for the confrontation would be Artur's grand social event. She needed a plan that would expose Lorena publicly, undeniably, to protect her sister and save the baby. The chess game was about to enter its final phase. The moment had arrived. Artur and Lorena were hosting a gala to announce their engagement and an important new business deal. The gala event was not just social. It was a media circus. The main hall of the Lacerda mansion buzzed with the New York elite bankers, politicians, and the press, all eager for a piece of the Lacerda empire. Saara was there, forced to serve, a speck of black and white among the tuxedos and designer dresses. However, she was not just an employee. She was the silent vigilante, and this was the perfect stage to expose the truth. Far from Lorena's security cameras, Saara had contacted Andre, the chef. The plan was risky, bordering on action cinema, but it was the only way to ensure the truth. "Are you sure this will work, Saara?" Andre whispered as she passed him in the kitchen, exchanging a dirty plate for a clean one. "It won't hurt her, will it?" "It's not lethal," Saara replied, her eyes fixed on the dining hall. "It's a high concentration, not of the debilitating alkaloid, but of a truth serum that your brother adapted from the lab. She'll become euphoric, lose her inhibitions, and speak her mind. We need a public confession, Andre, something Artur can't deny." Andre nodded nervously. "It's in her Perrier bottle. It's the only flat one. Just serve it when the speech begins." The culmination of the night began. Artur, pale but wearing the tycoon's mask, stepped up to the small dais for the announcement. Lorena, beside him, was stunning in a red dress, smiling for the cameras, the personification of the perfect fiancé. As Artur spoke about the future and the business merger, Saara, with steady hands, executed the planned accident. She approached the table where Lorena was seated. Instead of ordinary Perrier water, she poured from the special bottle. The colorless liquid blended perfectly into Lorena's whiskey. Lorena drank, her eyes fixed on Artur. Within a few minutes, the substance began to take effect. Her smile grew wider, her eyes brighter, as she began to gesticulate more extravagantly. Artur had just finished speaking and handed the floor to Lorena. She stood up, but instead of discussing the merger, she began to laugh loudly. So Artur. My darling Artur, she began, her voice rising, hoarse with euphoria. You are so predictable. Do you really think all this is love? The room fell silent. The press cameras began flashing frantically. I can't wait to have all of this, she screamed, pointing to the room with a wide gesture, before laughing hysterically. The baby, that little inconvenience to the inheritance, will just be a footnote in the transfer contract. And you fool Artur, will never realize you were being robbed by a smile and a red dress. The shock was overwhelming. Murmurs turned into muffled shouts. Lorena continued her maniacal confession, admitting every step of her plan, from the control of the baby to the business embezzlements. The deepest silence of all came from Artur. Artur's reaction was physical. He staggered, as if punched in the stomach. The love and trust dissolved in seconds, replaced by a stunning pain. He couldn't take his eyes off Lorena's smiling, malevolent face, who now looked like a stranger. In this chaos, Saara stepped out of her discretion. She approached Artur. He saw her. Her expression of despair and desperate loyalty was the only truth in the room. Artur, with a monumental effort, composed himself, ignoring the cameras. He looked at Saara, his eyes burning for answers. He realized that she was the only piece of his world that was still whole, and that she had risked everything to save him. The hall plunged into chaos, as Lorena was restrained by security guards. In her state of euphoria and confession, Artur activated the security system and called the police. The engagement announcement had turned into a scandal of epic proportions. Lorena, realizing the seriousness of the situation, tried to flee, but the police intercepted her in the parking lot. Under the incessant flashes of the cameras, Artur was devastated. His businessman mask completely shattered. He turned to Saara, who stood at a respectful distance, but visibly shaken. Saara, he said, his voice hoarse with disbelief and betrayal. He grabbed her shoulders, ignoring the crowd. What else do you know? Why didn't you tell me before? Saara knew this was the moment for the hard truth. She could no longer hide behind the role of an employee. I know everything, sir, she replied, with the honesty he craved. I know about the vial. I know about the substance the driver, Henry, was giving Julian. I know she was slowly poisoning him. I found your wife's diary, and I know about the blackmail. She took a deep breath and continued, without seeking merit or sympathy. I only didn't speak earlier because I feared for Julian's life and the safety of my own sister. Lorena threatened me, sir. She knew I had a debt and that my sister needed treatment. If I had spoken, I would have been discredited, and she would have gotten rid of Julian immediately. Before you knew the truth, Artur released her and stepped back, absorbing the magnitude of the betrayal and Saara's silent heroism. He saw the brutal honesty in her eyes. She had risked everything to save his son, expecting nothing in return. Julian, he murmured, his face contorted with fear. She has a backup plan. She knew the police would catch her. She knew she could fail. We can't risk it. Artur made an impulsive and urgent decision. Guided by paternal instinct and the newfound faith he had in Saara, he ran to the baby's room. Julian was sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the chaos. Artur picked him up and wrapped him in a blanket. He rushed back to Saara. I need to get Julian out of this house, Saara. Now, I don't trust anyone else. Please, you have to come with me. You are the only one who knows what's keeping him alive. Please. His trust, expressed in a desperate plea, touched Saara deeply. She didn't hesitate. I will, sir. They fled together in an unmarked car, a black sedan Saara had seen Henry use. The scene was intimate, full of tension and adrenaline. A ruined magnate, a heroic cleaning lady, and a baby in danger, speeding through the darkness, leaving the Crystal Palace and all its secrets behind. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, they were fighting side by side. The road led them to the countryside, away from the cold glare and watchful eyes of the city. Arthur's chosen destination was a remote hunting cabin, an old, forgotten property that belonged to his late wife. It was a simple retreat, built of rustic wood, surrounded by pine trees and the silence of nature. Far from luxury, Arthur was finally vulnerable and disarmed. He was just a scared father. In the hideout, Saara took charge with surprising calmness. She built a fire, sorted out basic supplies, and most importantly, cared for Julian, who was visibly improving without Lorena's regular doses of the substance. "I don't know what I would have done without you, Saara," Arthur confessed, sitting on the cabin floor, watching her. He looked like a man who had been emptied, but was now slowly being filled by reality. "My wife tried to warn me, and I was too blind to see. I lost her, and I almost lost my son." Saara sat beside him. "Grief does that to us. It makes us easy targets. You need to understand what happened to know how to defend yourself." Saara picked up Arthur's wife's diary and handed it to him. "Read this. You need to know how far your wife's protection went." The reading of the diary was a sacred moment of sharing. Arthur read, tears streaming down his face, about the love, the fear, and finally, the security policy. He stopped at the final passage. "I created a secret clause in the will that only activates if Julian is in danger, and a person outside the family is named as temporary guardian. This person is the only one who can access the rest of the security documents I created, including the evidence that will prevent Lorena from seizing what is Julian's. It's a protection mechanism, a last hope. I entrusted this key to a person with a pure heart, not to money." Arthur closed the diary, his hand trembling. "Who is this person, Saara? Who did she name?" "I don't know," Saara replied honestly, "but the clause only activates if Julian is in danger, which is evident, and this person is outside the family, which eliminates all the lawyers and partners." The crisis had turned into a shared mission. In the intimacy of care, they grew closer. They shared Julian's milk, changed diapers, and for the first time, genuinely laughed at the baby's babbling. Arthur saw Saara's strength, intelligence, and heart. She was not just a cleaning lady. She was the anchor that kept him from sinking. Baby Julian was asleep. The silence of the cabin was broken only by the crackling fire. Arthur, unable to hold back any longer, turned to Saara, his eyes fixed on hers. "I have never met anyone like you, Saara. You saved me. You saved Julian." He leaned in. The kiss was hesitant at first, born of adrenaline, gratitude, and shared pain. But it soon deepened. It was a kiss that promised warmth against the coldness of the world. The romance finally exploded, not as a superficial spark, but as a furnace built in chaos.
They broke apart, breathing heavily, their foreheads touching. "We can't," Saara whispered, referring to the difference in their social positions. "We can," Arthur replied, the determination in his voice, stronger than in any business meeting. "There is no us and them here. There is only the three of us, and I won't let you go." Danger still surrounded them, but for the first time, Arthur Lacerda felt he had something real to protect. The peace in the refuge did not last. Lorena, despite being imprisoned, had planted bait. Their location was compromised. Lorena had hidden a tracking chip in the wristwatch Arthur wore, an expensive gift, conveniently given before the engagement. Saara and Arthur were in the cabin, enjoying a rare moment of calm, when the sound of engines invaded the forest. "Lorena," Arthur whispered, pale. "It's not just her. She's locked up," Saara countered. "It's the backup plan. We have to go." They attempted to flee, but it was too late. The door burst open with a crash, revealing Henry, the driver, and two more thugs. "I'm sorry, Mr. Lacerda," Henry said, the coldness in his eyes confirming what Saara already suspected. "I received orders to clean up Lorena's mess and ensure Julian and the cleaning lady disappeared. It wasn't personal." Arthur, furious, tried to fight but was quickly immobilized. Saara, holding Julian, was pushed against the wall. "Lorena is not the mastermind," Saara shouted, desperate to buy time. "She was just a pawn." "Who is really behind this, Henry?" Henry hesitated. Saara's gaze was piercing. He knew he was ruined. In the confrontation and the twist, the driver dropped the real bombshell. Not out of loyalty, but out of revenge against the true mastermind. She wasn't the boss. She was being manipulated by someone who had the most to gain from the baby's death and control of the company. Someone who knew all the details of the will and the security policy. Arthur staggered at the confession. Who, Henry? Who else would have access? At that very moment, the cabin door opened again, and the true villain entered, smiling sadistically. The secret identity was Michael Vance, Arthur's trusted partner and longtime lawyer. Henry, you shouldn't have spoken, Vance said, with terrifying calmness. Arthur, my dear, you trusted me for 20 years, but the baby is a problem. With Lorena out of the way and you devastated by the loss of your son, control of your shares would fall to the right person. Me. Lorena was just the perfect distraction. Vance was ready to clean up the service, brandishing a silenced gun. Vance, you despicable traitor, Arthur yelled, fighting against the thugs. Saara, however, acted with a cunning that only came from years of observing the backstage. She didn't have a weapon, but she had knowledge. As Vance prepared to shoot, she grabbed a disposable cell phone she had kept in her pocket. She called Andre, the chef, who was on alert, knowing that Saara and Julian's lives were at stake. Andre. The police! The hunting cabin. The villain is Vance, the partner. He has a gun. And use the claws, she screamed, before throwing the phone into the fire. The ensuing confusion gave Arthur the time needed to immobilize a thug. Saara, using the distraction, threw an old boot at Vance's head, who staggered and dropped the weapon. The sound of police sirens, arriving faster than Vance ever thought possible, broke the silence. Saara's heroic action, with the help of her faithful ally, had worked. Vance, the brain behind everything, was handcuffed. His plan unraveled at the last minute. The chaos dissipated, and the dust settled. Vance and Lorena were arrested, and Julian, safe in his father's arms. The confirmation of the romance came in the form of a legal process. The security policy was activated. Amidst the legal paperwork, the name of the temporary guardian was revealed. Saara. To the shock of everyone, Arthur's lawyers, the press, and even Saara herself, Arthur's deceased wife, in an act of extreme foresight, had named the one person she implicitly trusted, the humble cleaning lady, who had given her the most sincere advice about the Crystal Palace. The secret clause read, Saara, the guardian of my house's silence and warmth, is to be Julian's protector, should evil befall us. Saara officially became Julian's guardian, a testament to her worth and loyalty. Months later, the Crystal Palace was no longer cold. The marble was still white, but now it was filled with laughter and light. Julian, healthy and plump, crawled across the floor. Arthur and Saara were together, not out of duty or convenience, but out of a love that was born in chaos and forged in trust. They were in the living room, the fireplace lit, the warmth real and palpable. This was the new chapter. Arthur looked at Saara with a smile of complicity and adoration as she rocked Julian. The chaos is finally over, he said, taking her hand. Thank you for everything. Now tell me, Saara, what are you going to do now? Travel the world, open your own business with the Lacerda fortune. Saara smiled, the same determined smile she had by the trash can the day she found the vial. She kissed Julian's forehead and looked at Arthur, with a mischievous glint in her eyes. I am your son's guardian, Arthur, and perhaps, she said, squeezing his hand, the new lady of this house if you'll have me. After all, who is going to sweep and clean up the dust of our past? If you loved this story of intrigue, loyalty, and unexpected romance, don't forget to click subscribe right now and join us for the next adventure. Until next time.